Right. Welcome, everybody. This is Formidable Jewish Women at South Hampstead, the first in this series on Zoom. And tonight, it's the star performers, Norman Lebrecht, in conversation with Maureen Lipman, CBE. Thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Ellie. Wonderful that we've topped the 100. Keep the numbers coming. Let's see if we can break Zoom tonight. Maureen, thank you so much for joining us. It's really, really good to have you with us. I don't need to say virtually anything by means of introduction because everybody knows you, everybody's heard of you. I was looking at your credits today and wondered how anybody had managed to do so much work in that short span of time between adolescence and maturity. So many of the things that you've done are familiar to everybody. People are also familiar with the work of your late husband, Jack Rosenthal. We'll talk about him a little bit in a moment. And we will just try and look at that life that you've led, that took you from Hull to some of the best stages in the land, to the screen, to television, to Coronation Street, and beyond. So, Maureen Lipman, welcome to South Hampstead.
Thank you, Norman. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And history, something that we'll talk about forever, probably, what was like in lockdown grandma. And some things have improved and some things have got a lot worse. And I don't know if any of you think they know what they're doing, but you know, we can only just do our best, can't we? And it's pretty scary. But hey, let's talk showbiz. Go ahead, Norman. Grill me.
Maureen, you really think this is the scariest time of our lives? I mean, you missed the Blitz. We both missed the Blitz. Has there been no scarier time than this, do you think?
Well, I'm not scared. I mean, when I say scarier times, I mean it's
uncertain.
You're scared?
Uncertain.
Yeah, it's uncertain times, and we're living in. It's a bit like the period before the First World War, I guess, because it's so beautiful outside. The sky was never bluer, the plains were never fewer, the grass was never greener, the flowers were never more beautiful. And yet, you know, some of us are walking like this, and some of us are petrified because they're so alone. I'm used to this because as an actor, it's not that much different from resting. And I know you very kindly said that I've fitted a lot in, but then it's a lot of years, Norman. It's 51 or 2 years, and I've been constantly working.
Well, resting is a state of mind, and sometimes it never happens. I had a friend, Richard Bebb, you may have known him. He was one of the...
Gwen Watford's husband, right?
Yeah, that Gwen Watford's husband, exactly, and the best voiceover man in the business. And he used to go and visit John Gielgud twice a month. Very fond of John. And once when John was 91, 92, Richard came, knocked on his door, and John was looking really depressed and said to Richard, so what's the matter? What's the matter? He said, look at the diary. He says, nothing in there beyond November.
Well, we hope never to retire, as long as the brain keeps going. And you can't, you know, the brain is the last unexplored continent, isn't it? So you can't ever tell whether you one day walk on stage and go, and that'll be that, because you'll have lost your front, and we are.
What was the first time you went on stage as a girl in Hull? What was that?
The first time I went on stage in Hull was the pantomime, where they said, are there any little kids who'd like to, you know, and I was there. And then I had a very good drama teacher. Well, she was my English teacher, Joan Nicholson at the Newland High School for Girls. And she put me in, she cast me as Dr. Faustus in an all-girls school. Yeah, and I made a bit of a splash in the local paper with my portrayal of a medieval philosopher. And and it kind of went from there. I think I got big-headed because 40 odd years later, I sat having tea with Joan Nicholson, and I said, I did so well in Dr. Faustus. I said, why did you use a play that had no women in it in an all-girls school? And she said, well, why not? Why shouldn't women do what? I mean, she was ahead of her time. And then I said, and why did you cast me as Margaret, the serving wench in Much Ado About Nothing? I'm a natural Beatrice. And she said, why do you think? And I said, I got big-headed, didn't I? She said, mm-hmm. So it was a good early lesson. It was a good lesson to learn. You know, you can get above yourself.
So how old were you when you sold your soul?
When I sold my soul, and then when I kissed Helen of Troy, bring me those lips, I was 14.
Goodness. Hull was quite a Jewish town.
Well, you know, it had three shoes. The one that the people with money went to, the one that the people in trade went to, and my father's. I went to my father's. Mum didn't like it because it was just a room, not through. The women were at the back talking instead of on the balcony talking.
So your father's was the one that nobody went to?
Father's was the one that nobody went to. It's the really, you know, the ne'er-do-wells, or would like to do well but can't quite yet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now there isn't even a, you know, they have a Lubavitchy rabbi who occasionally calls, but there isn't really a shul as such. And yeah, my friend Valerie, who's plugged in today, her brother Howard virtually kept it going for years, but then he moved to Manchester. So I don't know. I go back once a year to visit the graves, and a very kind couple of old friends, Stuart Friedenthal and Harold Flasher, they come and meet me at Brough, and they take me to the grounds because they have a key, and you have to get in the cemetery at Hull because of the kind desecration that goes on that's locked, and so you have to have a key and a hammer, and you put the key in and you turn it and then you hit it with the hammer, and that's how you get in. So my brother Jeffrey, who's you know, was there once to go, which was very good because he doesn't often visit, and he didn't have the key, so he came all the way from Brussels and stood at the gate sort of looking, saying, I wonder where Mum and Dad are, and Auntie Frida and Uncle Lizzie, I wonder, and got back on the train and went back to Brussels. So it's but it's a great place, Hull. I wanted to say it's a great place to get away from, but I'm very fond of it. I mean, I don't know if the feeling is mutual, because it never is. If someone comes from that city, then it's famously said, you know, if you're that bloody good, what are you doing here? I think.
What kind of house? What kind of house did you grow up in? Was it a terraced house or?
Yeah, it was a terraced house, and it was the house I grew up in. And then when I'd gone, they moved to a better house in the Greenway. And then after my dad went, my mum moved to a flat, and she could see the Humber Bridge, which is a fantastic structure. Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen it, you should go and see it. It's a very charismatic place, Hull, because it says, here we are, if you don't like us, you know what you can do. And it's got this wonderful laid back doer sensibility about it, which, you know, allows it, springs from the fact that it's sort of the end of the line. But when you also think about it, it's also the beginning of the line for us, because a lot of people, a lot of Jews came into England via Hull. And the one
thinking that it was New York.
Yeah.
Some of them still do.
I think they know now.
This is what put you on Broadway, wasn't it, Maureen?
President Trump was their mayor.
It was your mother, wasn't it, who really encouraged you to go on stage?
She did. Yeah, she loved me being a performer. Not everybody did, but you know, I would always get up and entertain her friends when they came. And you know, I think they were simpler days for women. You know, you had your place and you dressed up very nicely all the time, and took your pinny off quickly if anybody came to the door, and you cooked and you baked and you brought up your children and you went to shul, and you know, you were not trying to split yourself into 7 places at once. at the same time, she actually knew that I had something, because I kept doing musical festivals and things. And in fact, my friend Valerie, who's tuning in, and we did Sir Peter and Lady Teazle at the musical festival. I think we did rather well, but we got kicked out of elocution lessons because she made me laugh. And in the end, the elocution teacher kicked us out and rang our parents, which was bad news, because she was the person who really said to me, "You can go on with this." So I had some good mentors, obviously.
Were you getting singing lessons as well?
No, I didn't get it. Come on, this is, I'd scarcely been to the theatre. I just sang, I sang like badly, but I thought it was great. I sang Alma Cogan songs and I did impersonations. And at school, obviously, I was a bit of a, I organised concerts on the last day of term, and, I just had it in me, but not just me, the whole crowd, the whole year that I was in. One was two brilliant artists, one fantastic singer who went to the Guildhall School of Music. I mean, it was, we were the baby boomers, and we had that grant from the whole council, which sent us to drama school. I mean, how on earth? My father had a tailoring shop, a gents outfitting shop, in a very idiosyncratic place on Monument Bridge, and I suppose he made money. We were comfortably off. We had a car. We had one of those cars with wood all around it. I loved them. Was it a Minor? I mean,
was it a Humber or a?
No, it was a Morris Minor, I think. With
Morris Minor.
That was a very Jewish car, because it was like driving in Stratford-on-Avon, wasn't it? And but I don't think they could have afforded both tuition fees and the living in London. But there was no question, nobody ever tried to stop me. And I auditioned at LAMDA and Rose Bruford. I got turned down by Rose Bruford, and I went to LAMDA, and that was it. I was off. That was, I learned a lot at LAMDA, and I made some good friends. Leslie Joseph and I shared a flat. We're still FaceTiming each other to this day. She's complaining about no one to do her roots and knitting all day, and I'm sitting here crocheting. I mean, it's 51 years after we met, and we have our yacht sites at the same time. She for her mother, Vicky, who was 103, and me for Jack on Friday night, 16 years. Which
last
unbelievable. It's yesterday. Yeah, so we've stayed good friends. There was Brian Cox, there were Anna Carteret, quite a lot of. No, Anna Carteret wasn't at LAMDA. Get a grip from me.
We'll talk about Jack in a minute, but let's just to your earliest impulses. What gave you more satisfaction, making people laugh or making them cry?
Say that again, please.
Going back to your earliest feelings as a performer, what made me more satisfaction, making people laugh in the way that you affected an audience?
I think I laughed a lot at Lucille Ball, and I still do. If I ever go to New York, I put it on and I never get out the flat because.
No, but your effect, your impact on an audience. Did you like to make people laugh, or did you like to awe them, to make them?
No, I wasn't much of an awe. I wasn't very Norman. No, I did like to get laughs, and my mother would say, "Tell them the one about," and I would just switch on, and and Jack was pretty much the same. He took over and said, "Oh, tell them the joke about the Professor of Logic. Oh, I love that joke," and that's all you need. Somebody who doesn't get tired of your ceaseless performing, who's admiring of vivacity rather than putting you down. And I think the Ashkenazi Jew is very much saying, hey, look at me, I'm clever. Hey, see, I can sing, I can dance, I can wiggle on my belly like a snake. But the Sephardi, which Guido, who's been my partner for a few years, Guido's Sephardic, and it's a very, very different, very, you don't overpraise your children, and you don't make you don't go into, you never flash, you dress quietly, your food is different, and you observe rather than go, hey, do you like me? Do you like me? So I think, it's...
The laughter is part of our collective defense mechanism, certainly among Ashkenazi Jews, that if we make them laugh, maybe they won't kill us.
Well, that's true, and that sadly continues to this day.
So you're down in London.
I don't know about you. I'm not laughing at the moment. I mean, you have to take this with a pinch of a large jar of Cerebus, but the situation for the Jewish community is not funny again, and that's unbelievable. When you have a situation where you can have neo-Nazis marching in Germany, then it does make me draw in my breath, you know.
I think we've noticed that over the last few years in one or two pieces you may have written about the Labour Party.
The Labour Party is, yes, it's hopefully onto a different plateau now. Keir Starmer seems like a Labour Party leader, as opposed to, hey, we've stumbled into a Marxist world. What's happening? Yeah, swings and roundabouts, obviously. But once Jenny Formby had gone, I did actually breathe out, probably for the first time in a few years.
I think Keir Starmer attends Southampton Synagogue more often than some members.
Does he really?
He's a local MP.
Oh, right, I see, yes. But is he got a Jewish wife? I'm asking, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. But he hasn't asked for a mitzvah yet. That'll come.
Well, maybe on mitzvah day he can. He's very kind to donkeys, isn't he? It's Keir. Isn't he very kind to donkeys? Hasn't he got a thing about?
Has he got a donkey sanctuary?
Yeah, that's. I think if you wanted a leader, a man who is kind to donkeys would seem to me to be a good bet. And yeah, I remember once after Jack died, he was given a posthumous award, and the kids and I went up to, I want to say Bradford, it was somewhere near there, and people kept getting up and receiving awards, which was a big vase with a donkey on it, and they kept talking about donkeys in their lives, and we hadn't been told that this was all in aid of a donkey sanctuary. And to this very day, I've got in my garden out there, I've got this big vase of donkeys. I don't really understand.
Jack would have got a scene of it.
I've been very creative during this lockdown. I mean, I've literally painted and drawn and stenciled. And yesterday, I actually, terrible thing to say, and I hope Keir Starmer doesn't watch this, but I'm sure he's there. I sprayed that vase gold, and it looks wonderful in my garden now. Yeah.
Where did you meet Jack? Because you're down in London sharing digs with Leslie, and he's up in Manchester, right? And he's about a dozen years older than you?
At least.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have a penchant for older men, Norman. You can make of that what you want.
I'll take that as a compliment, misplaced as it might be.
There's no toy boy in my life, nor has there ever been. I don't know why. My dad was a lot older than my mother, so it works fine until they leave. But no, I was at the Olivier's Old Vic for 3 years, best time ever.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I've got that wrong, haven't I? I got this big job, didn't I, in Up the Junction. It was the biggest film role I've ever had, or anybody, you know, it was just an amazing coup. And that brought me a bit of work in theatre. And then I got this job in the Stables Theatre. I do apologise to anyone who's already knows this, because, you know, I've said it. I wish I had something more interesting to talk about, but yeah, and there was this Stables company in Manchester with a company of 24 actors. John Shrapnel, John Fraser, Andre von Giesegem, you know, I mean, it was a distinguished bunch of people. And the idea was to put on little plays in this theatre specially built out of a stable around the corner from Granada. But actually, what it was that every television company in the country had a bar. But Granada, set up by the Bernstein brothers, was dry. So one way or another, they thought it was a good idea to have a little theatre. It never really worked, but that bar was buzzing. Everybody from television went there, and everybody from Manchester, Georgie Best would drink in there, and the journalists would drink in there, and there were lockdowns, and it was sensational. And funnily enough,
that's where you met Jack?
No, I didn't. No, funnily enough, there was another bar around the corner called the Film Exchange, and I went in there, and here was this dark, soulful-looking man in a grey Marks and Spencer's sweater with a black dicky over the neck, and we got to talking.
What was his chat-up line?
What was his chat-up line? I don't know, he was just very funny and very sweet, and kind of looked a bit like Yves Montand, if anyone remembers Yves Montand. I had a boyfriend vaguely from drama school, and it all went out the window as soon as I met Jack. A week later, I thought, I'll probably marry this bloke. But it took him 4 years to really think that was a good idea. He'd been briefly married before, and it hadn't gone well. So our first date was at Fulda's Kosher Restaurant. We were the only people in there, except for one man who was eating his meal. And as we walked through the door, he said, "Tell me something," he said. "If you order braised steak, does it necessarily mean you've got to have gravy?" And I think, you bond over something like that, don't you? That was it, really. Yeah, 34 years later, 2 kids, and a lot of love and a lot of good work for both of us, because he was, as I was sort of saying earlier, he was a man who was not threatened by women. Women loved Jack. And indeed, after he died, I had all my girlfriends ringing me up saying, you do know that I really loved Jack. No, I mean, I loved him. And I said, I sort of didn't think about it, but yeah, he was a new man born in 1931. He thought nothing of doing the school run, or the making a chip butty, or changing a nappy, or doing a dental. But he thought he was absolutely a great bloke. If you wanted to be an actress, I mean, we shared. Yeah, there you are.
I think the only proper conversation I had with him was one year at the Standard Awards. I had you both on my table, and you were up and about and working the room. And Jack, I didn't know at the time, he was already quite...
Doesn't sound like me, Norman. Working the room.
Well, you were going and chatting to people around the room. And he was a bit somber, and I didn't know at the time that he was already quite ill. And so we had a really quiet and somber conversation.
He was very deadpan.
That's right. But it was no effort at all to draw him out. He was, he gave of himself quite naturally. And I think the conversation went from Manchester United to
Manchester United,
theatre, to to religion and philosophy and all sorts of stuff. And I just remember a really, really intense 10 minutes that we had before you got back to the table and put me in my place.
Well, I watched him once. I'm about to royalty drop. I watched him once with the Queen Mother at lunch at Clarence House, and he came at me with a white face, and he said, "I'm sitting next to her." And I said, "Oh, it's great." And he said, "Well, what am I going to talk about?" I said, "Oh, come on, you'll just be yourself." And I watched them as they sat down, and she said something to him, and he replied, and she laughed. And I thought, oh, he's going to be all right. And that was that. And afterwards I said, what happened when you sat down? And he said, well, she said to me, "I'm so very happy to be sitting next to you, Mr. Rosenthal." And I said to her, "See if you still think so in half an hour, Mum." And they were off. They talked about sculpture, because he was an amateur sculptor, and he was very good, really good.
The other role that Jack still plays in all of our lives is, if any of us has a bar mitzvah coming up, we had a grandson bar mitzvah not long ago, you do everything possible to make sure that the boy doesn't see the mitzvah boy before he has to go through it, because otherwise it's going to be dangerous.
Of the knowledge, isn't it? Every knowledge.
Yeah. I had, Maureen, trust me, I had at least one sleepless night that he might somehow sneak it up on video and see. Was that in any way autobiographical? Was that Jack's bar mitzvah?
No, because I mean, his bar mitzvah would have been just after the war, or in 1931.
Even
during the war. So it was hardly, and funnily enough, Guido's in Cairo, in the shul in Cairo, Guido's was with 12 other boys. They did them in batches. No, I think he just wanted to write about, he was always very interested in the passage of boyhood to manhood. And when you suddenly realize that you perhaps don't want to be a man, if a man involves being like your dad and your uncle Jeffrey and you know, so the realization that he could do that in the form of bar mitzvah boy play came after the desire to show that, and quite a few of his plays feature. I mean, Patang and Kipabang is about exactly the same thing, but it's a little bit older. But it is that sudden realization of freedom from childhood. Suddenly your innocence goes. And that was his theme, along with failure was a great theme of Jack's, a great theme, that there's a sort of nobility in what most people regard as failure. So you would get the football ref who scores the goal so that the team he wants wins, and the firemen in London's Burning, the taxi drivers some who make it and some who fail. It was a thing that he had.
Yeah, the evacuees and the taxi drivers. Those are the others that everybody remembers.
Yeah, I think it's
the knowledge it was called, right?
Knowledge, I think, was his best play, because the director and director being an American called Bob Brooks, no longer with us, had a vision. Bob Brooks brought the idea to Jack. He didn't know anything about it. He talked to a few cab drivers, and suddenly he realized he could write a love story to London, which he had sort of fallen for. He was a real Mancunian, but he had kind of, when he finally agreed to come and live in London, which he never wanted to do, and certainly his mum, who lived in Blackpool and relied on him, didn't want him to do it. And it was a worry, but from the minute he came, he kind of fell in love with London, and the knowledge was a great way of showing that. And of course, then I directed it in the theatre, and it was just a joy. I mean, every cab driver had us on that upturned seat, go and see the knowledge. And every night when it got to the place where the Jewish knowledge boy was being tested in bed by his wife, and I would sit at the back and watch every elbow on every woman go, that was you. Yeah, so it's been wonderful in some ways being able to carry on Jack Rosenthalism into just to keep the candle burning. It's been lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely time for a new production of A Mitzvah Boy, but preferably when I'm out of town.
Most widows have such a hard time when their husband died, because you're allowed about 6 months to grieve, and then everybody expects you just to never mention that person again. So, I'm very aware that I'm lucky in that I can mention the man I spent so many years with through his work.
You said the other day that Jack thought he'd learnt everything through being a scriptwriter on Coronation Street. Yeah. And that your return to Coronation Street now was a kind of a closing of the circle or a repayment of the debt. Talk me through that.
Well, Jack and Tony Warren were both, they started at Granada on the same day when it was just a car park with a booth in it. And and so he knew Tony very well. And when Tony's show went on, Jack called him up and said, it's magnificent. And Tony said, never mind what you think. What did your mother think? Because it's always been a matriarchal program, like so many of the best British plays have been. And he said, I'd love to write one. And Tony said, well, you know, have a go. And he wrote episode 13. And I think before we were shut down, we were on episode 9,675. So I guess it's going to catch on. And for me, yeah, I reached a place in my life where I'm fully aware that I'm not going to be offered anything very classical. I'm not going to be in suddenly a movie star. I can do plays, yes, in the West End. I can write. I can do the radio a bit. But you know, when that came along, I didn't hesitate because it just seemed to be very organic to go. I mean, I'd been in it before briefly once. Bette Lynch, Julie Goody, had a bit of a meltdown when she came back and she realised it was 5 episodes a week. Well, now it's 6, and it's just an unbelievably fast turnover. You wouldn't believe it. I mean, you know, you get your lines, you learn them the night before, you go on the set, you read them once, you block it once, move it, and then you film it. Thank you, next. So you got to be pretty quick to do that. And they are all, I mean, they're very well cast, the Coronation Street actors.
Yep.
And it's a nice little, I mean, it's a nice little setup there. They've all got their houses and their kids are in school, and, you know.
The village.
It's a village, and Barbara Knox drives herself in from the Cotswolds, and Bill Roach drives in an open car with his hair flying in the wind, and they're very nice. You know, it's difficult because I got myself a flat there, but I was coming back every weekend, and a lot of thinking can be done on trains. Of course, I started writing. I started writing again, let's put it that way, because of all the train journeys. So I wrote a string of monologues, which I then did on the radio. So, you know, there's a reason for everything, really, isn't there? And I then, of course, Rula Lenska moved in with me, and that was just, I mean, hilarious. And that's.
He moved in with you in Manchester?
Yeah, because she was playing Bill's love interest, and she was in a flat, and I was in a flat, and it was a 2-bedroom flat. So it seemed very. You know,
Maureen, next train journey, start writing a thing about your flatmates, because.
Well, I know, because she came with rugs and 3 lamps, and she draped gauze over them, and she had pots and pans, and she had throws and bedding, and I had a knapsack on my back because, you know, I wasn't staying. You know, hello, I must be going.
Did you feel, just coming off that, just, I mean, we've hardly had time to talk about any of your roles, all the roles that you wanted, and you know, yeah, I mean, there's still a Desdemona waiting, but.
I heard the other day that Ian McKellen's going to play Hamlet, so nothing's impossible. God knows who's going to play Gertrude. If he's going to play Hamlet, they'll have to dig her up.
Did you feel you were being typecast at all?
Typecast? I wasn't for a long while at the beginning. I mean, I was typecast after BT, yes. I became a Jewish actress, as Jack became a Jewish playwright after Bar Mitzvah Boy. Yes, but I didn't think I was before. I mean, look, the first part I had was as a you know, a working class Cockney girl, and I played, I look back now, I played a lot of kind of slightly pneumatic kind of lip-licking women in bars who picked up people like Leslie Phillips. You know, I mean, I never had the kind of career where one thing led distinctly to another. I never had the kind of career where somebody said, "Get me that girl," and then, you know, guided the rest of my. No, I've just gone from job to job, and I've been very fortunate in that I've had some wonderfully eccentric. I mean, I got Wonderful Town. I met Leonard Bernstein.
It was hard not to. It was hard not to.
Not to meet Leonard Bernstein.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, when he was around, he was a presence, and sort of everybody met him. But yeah.
Turned up backstage.
So you were in on the Town?
Wonderful Town. which
You
is
were in Wonderful Town. So
great.
you were doing that. I was sort of coming to this before. You were doing singing roles as well. I know you were in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I've done a few musicals. I mean, if the character sings, I tend to sing. I don't have a lot of confidence in myself as a singer, but you know, anybody can sing. The farmer and the cowman should be friends. Anyone can do that. And Thoroughly Modern Millie was a difficult one because Jack was in and out of hospital and in and out of remission, and I stood behind the door every night with chopsticks in my hair and my eyes pulled up like that, thinking, what the hell am I doing? And in fact, I was talking to someone the other day about stage fright, somebody who's writing a book about stage fright. And I thought, you know, actually, I don't think that I had a nerve in my body when I was doing things like Wonderful Town and Candida with Deborah Carr and all the plays at the National. I understudied Dinah Rigg and all those things. I think I just could not wait to get on the stage. It's only really as you grow older and you realise, you look and you get vertigo. You suddenly, I mean, I stood there in my one-man show at on the South Bank at the Purcell Rooms, which I'd done in Edinburgh. I stood there last year, and I'd written myself an opening where somebody, actually my dresser Sally, stuck a fishnet leg through the curtains, and then a gloved hand, and a little titter from the audience. And then I was on a step ladder behind the curtain so that my head was about 8 feet higher than the rest of it. Yeah. And then I sang a little song. But I actually stood there virtually throwing up, thinking, I will never do this again because nothing is worth the feeling that I have at this moment. I didn't have that any other night, but you know, it's not a nice feeling. You know, you need that front, you need that steel. You know, Rosemary Harris, who I worked with in Lost in Yonkers, you know, she is the strongest person I've ever met. You know, you need to have iron confidence to do what we do, and to stay vulnerable as well. It's a bit of a balancing act.
Who gave you the most confidence? Was it watching Olivier, or was it that generation?
Well, I learnt a lot through an amazing company: Maggie Smith, Albert Finney, Frank Finlay, Colin Blakely, Billy Whitelaw. Yeah, it was an amazing company. And Olivier, of course, and Joan Claret and Geraldine McHugh, John Moffat. I mean, it was just, I just took it all in. I mean, I went in playing second randy woman in a musical about William Blake, and three of us came out of a box. But I got to work with Michael Blakemore there. He was a wonderful director, is a wonderful director. And I also got to work with John Dexter, who was a wonderful director in a hideously bullying sort of way. So, you know, the point is you've got to learn how to take authority. And I've never learned that really, because I always think that I'm waiting for someone to give me something that I haven't already thought of myself. And sometimes they do, but not often.
You worked with Polanski on The Pianist.
Yes, that was an experience. Yeah. I mean, man is he's a fantastic director. He made a great film. Notwithstanding, because the only German in it really, he was a good German. And so it was a very acceptable film as well. And he was tyrannical, yes, expected to be obeyed and listened to and not crossed. And certainly that's not in my nature really. So we did cross, but we ended up, you know, I would work with him again tomorrow. But he was tough. And, you know, when he shouted cut, sometimes the Polish extras, because of course there were no Jewish extras, were there? Yeah. They would applaud him just for saying cut, you know, and he was prescribed. You know, my thing is to be on the balls of your feet so that anything, you know, I used to come off stage with Rosemary Harris and she'd say, oh, we were playing good tennis tonight, Maureen. And that's, you know, you want to be there. And even in Coronation Street, you want you want to listen with your lungs and your diaphragm so that it goes through you, not just be a talking head. And not every actor can be bothered with that, and not every director allows you to. And certainly everything we were processed to the slightest thing being different, not allowed. But I did fight that, and sometimes he let me get away with it.
But I mean, it struck me that in that film he was so intent on recreating the Warsaw that he'd known as a child, and that everything had to gel within it, and you were part of what needed to gel.
Oh yes, it's the way he works. I'm sure he's exactly the same on every film. He's got a vision, and he's a brilliant man, and with that brilliance comes his temperament.
Was there a role that got away? Was there one that you thought, this is me and this I really want, and then it didn't happen?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I have to audition like anybody else, and nowadays that means, putting a reel together, and I never quite got around to doing it properly. And I've been up for things. Of course, I've lost a lot of work, and I was offered all sorts of things like that I haven't found funny. I didn't realise Miranda was funny, for example. It's just taste. I've lost things, and but I think on the whole I've been guided onto the right things. But I've never come above. I've done at least 35 plays in the West End, and I've been in the West End and not been invited to the Evening Standard Stage Awards. Do you know what I mean? There's a certain...
Not while I was there, Maureen.
No, obviously, you must have had. But I'm saying, there's a level that somehow I don't think I've got above, but other people may think that's not true. It's hard to judge how the industry views you.
Yeah. Well, but whether you're in or out or up or down, all of those things. Yeah.
And some people might think that I'm difficult. I'm not difficult. I'm demanding of a variety. I want to try everything before and sometimes people just don't have time for that.
One last question before we throw it open. The BT role. More good, more harm, what do you think?
I think really I was probably a bit silly about it. It was a good commercial and it worked, but of course it did have a massive effect on my being perceived. I mean, I went out yesterday for my walk and a lady stopped me in Gloucester and she said to me, "I'm loving you in the Marigold Hotel." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." I said, "No, I'm really not Miriam Margolyes, and I would not want to be," okay? With a big smile. There is a perception of a sort of ethnic, and obviously more so because not only did the BT commercials. So when it came to the Jeremy Corbyn BT commercial, Ian Austin, MP, came to me and said, "Would you do that?" And my first thought was, no, it's taken me 20 years to shrug that thing, that anchor off my heart. But then the cause was bigger than the fear of typecasting, because what does it matter at 74 if you're typecast? So, we did that in a morning in this kitchen. We threw that together, and boy, I was glad I did it.
So you used that role as part of your campaign against Corbyn, against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. You were able to call that back as a piece of weaponry.
It was perfect, and I could see that. Ian Austin is extremely philo-Semitic, and I could see that it could do even that much good to get rid of that ridiculous, absolutely absurd surge and nip it in the bud. You have to. And we have to stand up and speak, and that doesn't make you popular, because I'm in a very left-wing business. So if I write things and I'm opinionated about things that matter to me, like Israel, it doesn't do well with my friends. You know, everybody hates that little golden democracy in the Middle East. It's much more unpopular than Myanmar, which kills and burns and rapes and pillages, or China, you know.
Maureen, I didn't think we'd be able to talk 50 minutes without coming to anti-Semitism. Let's throw it open and see if there are questions.
Okay.
Let's see what's coming up. How will people raise their hand or put a question on chat? How should we do this?
As you wish, or a combination of
Chat
both.
or combination, yes.
If you'd like to send a question by chat, please do so either directly to Norman or publicly. Otherwise, just wave, put up a Zoom hand, and Norman will come to you. So far, absolutely fascinating. Thank you both.
Pick up your old Bakelite phone. Dial.
I've got a question, Norman, for Maureen. It's Andrew.
Who is that?
Andrew Maurice.
Andrew, yes.
Hi, Maureen. Thank you. Tell me about writer's block.
Jack didn't seem to have it, which is galling for my daughter Amy, who is a playwright and has it quite frequently. He didn't seem to have it, and I don't have it. If I have something to say, I go to the typewriter and I say it, but you know, it's quite easy to write a thought. I mean, I wrote my one-woman show, and I was very, you know, it was a complete variety of monologues and jokes and all that. I've done it. I've written 2 one-woman shows, and you know, if I have a deadline, I write better. But often I write something. This week I sent something out and it was rejected. So it's not, you know, but writer's block itself, there's no answer for it. And I think it's bound up with other things that you feel about yourself, really. A lack of confidence. Again, the same thing. In Ready When You Are Mr. McGill, there's a famous scene at the end where the director says to the little man, he takes all his frustrations out, he says, the one thing you had to do and you couldn't do it. And the chap says, but this isn't real life. I might have been a very brave person in my life. I might have landed at Dunkirk. He said, this isn't real life. This is just pretend. And the director says, Mr. McGill, real life is how well you pretend. And boy, oh boy, is that ever the case? Because if you lose your front, such as it is, you know, I heard Rory Bremner the other night in the World Service talking about how he went on the Royal Variety Show and he just didn't know where he was or what he was doing. It's a nightmare. And you're never the same after that, you know, you never regain it. I wish I could say something clever and helpful about writer's block. The only thing is that everybody, to some extent, once you read about James Joyce or you read Arthur Miller and you realise that it's part of the game. And when you really have something to say and you really, you know, the carapace goes away, then you'll say it. Have you got it?
It's what you were saying before, that one moment on stage when you looked down.
Yeah.
You don't look down, you just carry on writing. You just keep, as long as you keep at it, as long as you don't look down.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. You move on. Yeah.
Just keep writing rubbish. Just keep writing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've written lots of rubbish, so I'm doing well.
Well,
More questions.
What do you care? Any other questions?
Who's raising a hand? What have we got on?
What have you got there at Southampton? Shy Jews?
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can see 2 hands. Yeah. Thank you. And under Hannah.
Hannah and David.
Hannah and David, indeed. You're on.
Okay, well, I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to Maureen for being so terrific. At the moment, I've got Norman's face on me. I'd rather see Maureen's face.
Hello.
Hello. But I wanted to ask you, what was your favourite piece that you ever did?
Favourite role?
when you were acting, what was your favorite?
Oh, that would be, I suppose it's a toss-up between Daytona, which I did at Park Theatre, and then at the Garrick, which was written by Oliver Cotton. And obviously Oklahoma was fabulous. A year of Hugh Jackman is not something one could easily forget. But finally, it would be the Joyce Grenfell, One Woman, because Joyce has stayed with me forever. It's still as relevant now, and I think about her all the time. And because it's what I do best, really, just going, spinning on a sixpence and going into other people. Mostly people don't like that. The critics don't like that because they think you're showing off. But on that occasion, the audiences packed us out for as long as it took, and the critics seem to like it. You know, you always have to remember that everybody has prejudices, and sometimes you just don't like someone's face. Everybody likes Judi Dench's face, but not everybody likes Maggie Smith's. And you know, it's just one of those things that you have to accept, that that reviews can be hard and cruel, and you just go on. Obviously, nobody likes to be criticised. But I'm reading Ken Tynan's book Profiles at the moment, and the pieces are dazzling. You know, if you ever want to see what Orson Welles was really like, or Olivia is fantastic, Gielgud, Richardson, you know, even writers Arthur Miller and Tom Stoppard. It's fantastic the way he sort of makes a stock out of everything that he's seen them do, boils it down to the absolute minimum, and then you've got the person. Fascinating.
Brian Doctor has a question. Brian?
Hi, there. I'm Maureen, and thank you very much. But to introduce a somber note, what is going to happen to the theatre? I mean, there's no possibility of people going to the theatre if you have to sit 5 seats away from everyone else. The actors can't go near each other. What's going to happen?
Hi, Brian. Nice to see you. Yes, well, it's going to be different. It's not going to die because theatre was there before anything else, probably, you know. It's not going to die, but I mean, you know, places like the Hampshire Theatre Club will emerge differently because, you know, you'll have a bit of leg room. And Park and, you know, the fringe theatres, they will adapt. But I mean, there's not going to be any money. And so the poor actors who generally work for nothing anyway, just to be seen, are really in trouble. And we're going to spend, you remember the King's Head, how the buckets are out all the time. In fact, I once went up there at a fundraiser and said, we'd like to have a collection today for new buckets. We're going to be doing benefits for the rest of our lives, aren't we? But not just theatre. But I don't think, Brian, I don't think it's going to ever die because people will just do it in their living rooms and they'll go out in the street and do theatre, and writers will always write. And Zoom, of course. I mean, I watched Andrew Scott in a one-man play the other day, and I watched Simon McBurney in Encounters, and you know, that's an evening well spent. If I sit and watch terrestrial television, then I feel quite sordid at the end of the evening. But actually, you know, this is fantastic that you can. God, I wish I'd had filmed some of the plays that I've been in my life. It kind of works because of the 9, you know, they can hide 9 cameras now. Whereas when I did Long Day's Journey into Night with Sir Laurence Olivier, I was the maid, right? I had like a tiny scene, but we transferred it to television, and it was completely rethought. The sets were rebuilt and everything, you know, so that worked. Oklahoma worked on video for the same reason. It was completely rethought. You can't just put a camera at the back of the theatre because you just, as an audience, you just go away. You might as well, you know, be in the gods.
Yes.
So I wish, I hope, like I hope everything's going to come back, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope he's going to get COVID.
Do we have any more questions? Do we have anybody who wants to volunteer roles for Maureen? I mean, I've got a secret role that I want her in, but let me hear. Let me hear from you. No, but Maureen, I'm going to write a role for you. I'm going to write a role for you in the Archers.
Thanks. But
You,
not these days. You're not. No, I would like a woman who can't next, you know, but now that Meryl has done it, I think we ought to give it another airing. It's a very funny play, really funny.
sorry, which play was that?
Glorious. It was a play by Peter Quilter about, he wrote Judy, you know, about Florence Foster Jenkins, the woman who hired Carnegie.
Yes, yeah.
So I made a stab at it, and I loved it. It was one of the funniest things I've ever been in. In fact, Princess Alexandra was told to shut up because she was laughing so much. But it was great. I got to sing 3 arias, you know, really badly, and it was great fun. It was a lovely company. So I hope we do that again. Otherwise, I'll just, you know, I'll do new plays if there's anything. For my age group. Yesterday I did Gogglebox for the first time with Giles Brandreth. We sat in Giles's home, 2 meters apart, drinking tea and watching television.
Maureen, I'm absolutely dumbstruck to know that you've done Gogglebox.
Oh, you're right.
No, I think it's wonderful. Do we have more questions?
You have to do what's there. There's no other way, you know. And at the moment, there's nothing there.
Norman, there is a question I've just sent you via the chat.
Yes. Thorny subject of Israel. I wonder whether this is Ellie asking. I wonder whether you feel you've ever lost work.
Sorry, it's just me forwarding it. It's from somebody else on one of the other.
Okay. I wonder whether you feel you've ever lost work because of you being outspoken about Israel. Have you had crosswords and open arguments with fellow actors about it? The question is from Sarah Deach.
Sarah, no, I don't think I've really. I mean, I did once have a discussion with Janet Sussman about it, and I said, well, some point you must tell me what you feel so strongly against Israel. And of course, with Miriam, yes, we have fallen out. I don't really understand why Jewish people would add to the argument. I think they take the higher ground, the university-educated, highfalutin type of Jewish people. I don't know why they would feel the need to do it when so many people are doing it anyway. What does that do? It's like the Hungarians in the war saying, you know, but I'm Hungarian. I've been in the guards. They won't come for me. Yes, they will. So I just. I don't go on a lot, you know, on programs and things about it because I'm not knowledgeable enough. I just know in my heart that we need that little place in the Middle East. I know in my heart that they've done a brilliant job of making that place the centre of tech and of ecology and turning barren land into what they've done. And I know that nobody ever gives them credit for what they've done, and they're judged quite differently from other countries, particularly other countries under threat for all these years and battling for their existence with a tiny, tiny country. So we know what it is, and I will always stand up and call on people who seem to hate the system in Israel, which of course is, you know, 6 parties trying to govern, but don't seem to care about the Yemen. I see no demonstrations against what's happening in China. Nobody comes out when it's the Burmese Rohingyas are persecuted. I never hear what Miriam or anyone else of that ilk, Michael Rosen or anybody, I never hear what they think about the other countries. I just hear what they think about Israel. And that really, I think, is more to do with them as human beings than it is to do with what is the truth. It is. I hope that answers your question.
Maureen, I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. One of these Zoom interviews and talks are really quite artificial, and we're still learning how to do it, and we're all feeling our way among it. But one of the few measures that one has, if it's been any good, is if you finish with the same number of people that you had at the beginning. So that's been brilliant. Listen, it's absolutely lovely to see you. I hope to see you again in the flesh before too long, and once we are able to all associate again. And let me hand over to Ellie to say a couple of words. But really, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being with us. You should know that Sunday night is not the God slot at South Hampstead, it's the doctor slot. So for weeks and weeks we've had consultants in palliative care and everybody coming in with their stories from the COVID ward. So you've shed a little light and happiness, and I'm really grateful that you've joined us.
Let me ask you something, Norman, which is about Facade by Edith Sitwell. I think I'm a natural Edith Sitwell. What do you think of that Facade as an idea?
Sorry, what was it? I didn't hear.
Edith Sitwell's Facade. You know.
Facade?
Yeah.
Gosh.
You don't have to answer, you can think about it.
Let me think about it. I mean, I haven't seen it in years. I know the William Walton version. All right, we'll be in touch. Okay. In this absurd world, it might work. Ellie, say goodbye to everyone.
Bye, bye.
Homework, Norman. You were both outstanding. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to LB for your work behind the scenes as well. In fact, this as part of our Formidable Jewish Women series was planned a long time ago. And it was in the diary way before COVID-19. But as they say, the show must go on. And this evening, it certainly has done. That's exactly what's happened. We're extremely grateful. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. See you all again very soon.
Bye.